Very, very skeptical. 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 But speaking of skepticals, so at the same rally, Donald Trump in Wisconsin, uh, decided to spin some yarns. And again, I watched Borat 2 yesterday, and I recommend watching that. There's a scene in Borat 2 where where he crashes CPAC. Um, there was a news story a while, like I think it was in January, of someone in a Trump suit crashing CPAC and screaming in the crowd when Vice President Pence was up there speaking. And the scene was really funny to watch in October of 2020. Because when I was watching Borat 2, right? Like the scene just starts and you see Mike Pence, the vice president, talk about how there's only 15 coronavirus cases and they're all isolated. We're fine. America's going to be great. And then it's like to know, right, what happened in between January and today, I thought that was amazing, right? Just like just watching that was just like wow. Right? I was really high, right? So it's like, damn, dude. 250,000 deaths later, where are we at? And you want to know where we're at? 250,000 dead people later, this is where we're at. Donald Trump spending a little bit too much time on Facebook.
You know, some countries, they report differently. If somebody's sick with a heart problem and they die of COVID, they say they died of a heart problem. If somebody's...
The best part about this, right, is that like he keeps mixing up the conspiracy theory here. So this is a very common conspiracy theory, is that, oh, COVID cases aren't real. They're not real. COVID deaths are fake. When people die of COVID, they're not dying of COVID. They're dying because their heart died, right? Yeah, sure, COVID made their heart give out, but no. It's because they had heart failure that they died. And if you remember, I think it was in July, the Trump administration kind of passed a new rule that changed the way COVID deaths are calculated. And recently the CDC managed to find out that about 300,000 people have died this year that would not have otherwise died. Like they look at the excess death rate over time, like over like 10, 20-year periods, and they calculated about 300,000 more people died this year, even when there's lockdowns, right? There's less car accidents, right? And that counts deaths of despair, suicides, right? Overdoses. That counts all that stuff. But the point is, I would attribute all of that to Donald Trump's failed policy. But back to the conspiracy theory here. I've got certain members of my family that use Facebook and are QAnoners. They weren't QAnoners back in May. They weren't QAnoners back in April, but now they're full-blown QAnoners. I hope to God that when Trump loses in the next couple of months, I hope to God that things don't explode, right? And that these people will go back to normal. Because have you thought, like, there are members of my family, right, that I otherwise would respect, who went from, like, somewhat normal, 50, 60-year-old to full-blown, Corona's not real, don't tell me to put a mask on, Donald Trump is our hero, right? So that's the kind of stuff. So I've been hearing this stuff since April. The idea that coronavirus deaths don't count because it's not coronavirus that's killing them. Yeah, sure, coronavirus corroded their lungs and they died because they couldn't breathe, but what? Corona? What's that? Right, so let's continue. Let's just reset this.
You know, some countries, they report differently. If somebody's sick with a heart problem and they die of COVID, they say they died of a heart problem. If somebody's terminally ill with cancer and they have COVID, we report them. And, doctors get more money and hospitals get more money. Think of this incentive. So some countries do it differently. If somebody is very sick with a bad heart, they die of COVID, they don't get reported as COVID. So then you wonder, gee, I wonder why their cases are so low. This country and their reporting systems are really not doing it right. If somebody has a really bad heart and they're close to death, even if they're not, but they have a very bad heart and they get COVID, they put it down to COVID.
He's mixing this up. He's saying if someone has a bad heart, like look back at 8 seconds and then we'll go back.
Countries, they report differently. If somebody's sick with a heart problem and they die of COVID, they say they died of a heart problem.
I guess he's talking about other countries there. Okay? Other countries. Beautiful countries.
They put it down to COVID. Other countries put it down to a heart. So we have to be, we're going to start looking at things because, they have things a little bit backwards. They have things.
Notice the cops for Trump and thin blue line terrorist symbols behind him. Might as well be a swastika. The thin blue line is the modern day swastika. You can feel free to quote me on that. I'm down to die on that hill. Like, if you were to imagine, right, like, let's just, you're a historian. Let's imagine, right, that this is just a swastika flag. What about this is different, right? Them chanting, lock 'em up, send them back, send them back. Terrorist swastika flags in the background. What's the difference? Seriously, I genuinely would like to know what the difference is between the thin blue line and the Nazi swastika. But the point here is this guy's pushing out these bizarre and inane conspiracy theories about how the CDC is manipulating COVID numbers to make Trump look bad and to secure funding for hospitals. It's bizarre, right? It's bizarre. So let's watch this other clip. This one, in a lot of ways, is even more bizarre because this is like going back to the other conspiracy theory. Oh, when you've been diagnosed with COVID, that's a case. So if you don't get tested, right, and the test doesn't come back positive or negative because you don't get tested, clearly you don't have coronavirus. Duh. It's the tests that are giving us coronavirus. Coronavirus is fake news, everybody. It's the tests. This is what Donald Trump is saying.
Got to get back. We got to bring our country. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. What do they have in common?
You got to bring them back.
North Carolina, Democrat governors.
Don't you dare say North Carolina in my presence. Don't you dare.
What do they have in common, right? North Carolina, Democrat governors who want to keep, watch. On November 4th, they'll all announce, you're open for business, we're open. And you notice they always go cases. You know why cases? Because we do more testing than anybody. So Barron it's a case. He's a young guy. Barron is a case. 99.9. You know that, right? 99.9. Barron's a case, and it's crazy. And you turn on and you say, cases have jumped. Cases, because we do. Now, if we did half the testing, we'd have half the cases. If we cut that in half, we'd have another half cut. We have the greatest testing in the world. The bad news is the fake news uses it as a
greatest testing in the world. So recently we had a coronavirus scare in my household earlier this month. And so a lot of members of my family went out to get tested. And you know how much a test costs? It costs several $100s if you don't have insurance. A test. And you know what the accuracy of the test is? It's not 100%. So imagine, right, you have to fork over, right, a couple $100s to get a test, right? And you don't even, you can't really guarantee that the test is accurate. I could have corona. I don't know. Another thing is, right, testing takes, at like best case scenario, if you don't pay exorbitant rates for it to get rapid testing, you will get like a 3-day waiting period. Some states, I've heard, have 14-day waiting periods on test results. What good is a test if you have to go to work the next day? You get tested, right? And then you go to work the next day. You go to work the day after that. You go to work the day after that, the day after that, the day after that. Then you get your test result saying you're negative. Well, that test doesn't mean anything anymore, right? So we have the best testing in the history of testing. You see places like in South Korea where they're rapid testing people like in doorways. Like to go into a restaurant, you get a rapid coronavirus test, and then if it comes back negative, you're allowed in, right? You see that in other countries, right? But we have the best testing in the history of testing, right? Testing costs an exorbitant amount of money for those of us without insurance, right? So we are under-tested. If anything is true, we are under-tested in this country. So let's continue.
We have the greatest testing in the world. The bad news is the fake news uses it as a
fake news
means. They talk about that. Mortality rate down 85%, because what we've done is incredible. What our doctors have done is incredible. And so I got it. They said, sir, excuse me, sir, you've just...
Reminder, Donald Trump said on the debate stage last week that he is immune to COVID-19. He's immune, he said, last week on the debate stage. So just throwing some context out.
Sir, excuse me, sir, you've just tested positive. I said, tested positive for what? The hell do I have? They said, you've tested positive, sir. COVID. I said, you mean the China plague?
Again, This guy is a comedian. That's what Donald Trump is. He is a comedian. And by gosh golly, he is funny as hell. He is really funny. But do you really want a comedian who doesn't understand basic science? Reminder, one of his pitches at a rally like a week ago was Joe Biden will listen to the scientists if he gets elected. Can't have that, can we, right? This guy is like, I'm not even joking, he's legit a comedian, and he's a good one. He's a very charismatic and a very funny comedian. That's why when you see all these people saying Trump shit, right, and they're not like saying it with good delivery, they look like Looney Tunes. Really, the only thing that keeps Trump even remotely, right, like separate from his loser fan base is the idea that he's got decent delivery, and that's only from fucking like what 50 or 60 years of training of being in the public eye, right? This guy has been in public, like having publicity, been talking to media probably since he was a teenager, right? So that's a very highly developed skill. So when you look at a sheriff in Florida who banned masks in their police force and they say this stuff, they just look like a moron. But when Donald Trump says it, it's funny, it's cool. But what you have to understand is he's not joking. He might be listing his things as jokes. He might be, giving it funny delivery, right? But he's not joking because his policy, his administration's track record is abundantly clear. 300,000 excess deaths in the year 2020 compared to previous years. And all he talks about is the economy. We got to get the economy, the stock market, the stock market. What? What? This guy is nuts. This guy is nuts. Are you really going to vote for this guy? Like, seriously? You're going to vote for this guy? What? You're going to vote for this fucking guy? Like, seriously. Like, do you need a friend to talk to? Do you need, like, a dog or something in your life? Like, what? You're going to vote for Donald Trump? Jesus.